Uh, Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session. I'm Onur Sultan from Beyond the Horizon International Strategic Studies Group. Beyond the Horizon is a Brussels-based nonprofit think tank specialized on defense and security-related matters. On an extremely important subject and with great guest speakers, today we will discuss terrorist designation of Ansar Allah or Houthis in Yemen. As you know, since November, the Trump administration has been in consultations with partners across the globe to have a sensing on the probable impact of such designation. There's open support from Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and the Yemeni government, but many US allies from within and outside the region, international organizations trying to help mitigate catastrophic impacts of the war on the Yemeni societies, experts following Yemen, and even US congressmen and officials have warned that such action would lead to shortages and delays for aid and commercial shipments. It would accelerate an imminent famine, and that it would undermine the peace process. Putting the extremely fragile economic and humanitarian conditions in Yemen into perspective, many experts say the impact will be devastating as the country imports more than 80% of basic commodities, medicine, and fuel, and that 70% of the population lives under Houthi control. That being said, the US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo announced late on Sunday that the Department of State would notify Congress of his intent to designate Ansar Allah or the Houthis as a foreign terrorist organization and a specially designated global terrorist entity. The press statement on the website of the State Department reads, the United States recognizes concerns that these designations will have an impact on the humanitarian situation in Yemen. We are planning to put in place measures to reduce the impact on certain humanitarian activity and imports into Yemen. According to the statement, the implementation of these designations will be effective as of January 19, one day before President-elect Joe Biden is sworn in. There are also reports hinting new sanctions on Iran are on the way before current Trump administration leaves office. The Houthi leadership condemned the designation, whereas the House of Representatives of Yemen and governments of the UAE and Saudi Arabia welcomed it. So this was a short summary of the state of the play. Today, we will delve deeper into the issue with our distinguished guests. Let me introduce them to you. Our first guest speaker is General Joseph Votel. He's a retired US Army 4-star general and most recently the commander of the US Central Command, responsible for US and coalition military operations in the Middle East, Levant, and Central and South Asia. During his 39 years in the military, he commanded special operations and conventional military forces at every level. His career included combat in Afghanistan and Iraq. Notably, he led a 79-member coalition that successfully liberated Iraq and Syria from ISIL. In January of 2020, General Votel took on the role of President and CEO of Business Executives for National Security, BENS. Votel is also a non-resident distinguished fellow at the Middle East Institute in Washington, D.C., and the Belfer Center at the J.F. Kennedy School of Government in Cambridge, Massachusetts. He is also an advisor to the Combating Terrorism Center at West Point, New York. Welcome, sir. Our second guest speaker is Bara Shiban. Shiban is Middle East and North Africa caseworker with the human rights group Reprieve. He worked as an advisor to the Yemeni embassy in London. Prior to his current role, he worked with Reprieve as Yemen project coordinator, in which he investigated drone strikes across Yemen. He also testified to the US Congress on the effects of US covert operations on local communities. Bara most notably served as a member of the Yemeni National Dialogue and was the rapporteur of the Counterterrorism Working Group. He has participated in 4 rounds of local negotiations between the tribes and the Houthis between 2013 and 15. Bara also participated in the Yemeni uprising in 2011 against former President Ali Abdullah Saleh, helping to run a media center in Sana's Change Square. Welcome, Bara.
Thank you.
Our third guest speaker is Dave Harden. He is the managing director of the Georgetown Strategy Group, a Washington, D.C. based next generation firm that leverages talent, technology, and capital to help solve some of the world's most complex problems. In 2016, President Obama nominated and the Senate confirmed Harden to serve as the Assistant Administrator for the US Aid Bureau for Democracy, Conflict, and Humanitarian Assistance. In that capacity, Harden spearheaded all US aid efforts to respond to global crises and stabilization efforts, including responses in Haiti, Iraq, Somalia, South Sudan, Syria, the West Bank, Gaza, and Yemen. Prior to his Senate confirmation, Harden served 17 years overseas in the Middle East, Central Asia, and South Asia, including as Minister Counselor for Yemen, Mission Director in the West Bank and Gaza, and Deputy Mission Director in Welcome. Welcome, Dave. Let me please also talk briefly about some housekeeping items. A recorded version of this webinar will be available. The link for the record will be sent to your email addresses used for registration. In the first round of the webinar, our distinguished speakers will reflect their views for 10 minutes. After this first round, we will have a second round whereby they will discuss and answer points raised during this discussion for 5 minutes. The last 10 minutes of this webinar will be devoted to a Q&A session. Please post your questions by clicking on the Q&A button on the lower part of the screen, together with who you address the question to. Please post them any moment you have them. Our speakers will also see questions and they may address those questions during discussions. So I now leave the floor to Bara for his views and comments. Yes, Bara.
Thank you, Anwar, so much for having us today. It's actually a great honor to be with you. I thank Beyond the Horizons for hosting this event, and I'm very honored to be along your distinguished guests, General Votel, such an honor, and Dave, I'm very glad to be with you on the same panel. What I would like to start is, of course, such a designation at such time when the Trump administration are about to leave office comes at inevitably will be very controversial. And I think Yemeni people and Yemen in general has been very unlucky over the last couple of years that the discussion has almost never been surrounded or really been about really Yemen and what's happening inside Yemen. Rather than it has been discussions around other issues where Yemen do come in the crosshair. It usually comes into the discussion when talking about counterterrorism, as the US, and I think rightly so, believes that the AQAP is a major threat to the regional and international peace and security. It comes into the discussion about Saudi Arabia. And when the discussion comes about Yemen, sometimes you would have some empathy coming from journalists, reporters, researchers who do view the Yemeni people as a victim of being fell trap into a proxy war between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And that's where the discussion comes. It's never really about Yemen. And unfortunate, I think, it's that this discussion about the Houthi designation has always been about how people view the Trump administration and how do they view Saudi Arabia and its allies, rather than the Houthis themselves. And do they actually deserve to be designated as the Houthis? And how does the normal Yemeni people feel about such a designation? And therefore, I would like to zoom in just a little bit and try to give an indication of how does it look like on the ground? What is the situation on the ground? Before we discuss, we're going to move and discuss about the effects of this of such designation. Beginning with the Houthis, I'm a person who have talked with the Houthis. I have been in, as mentioned by Honor, in 4 rounds of discussions between them and the local tribes. And the best way to understand the Houthis is you have a network of small militias. You have small militias literally running the northern parts of Yemen. Cities are run by smaller militias. Those small militias are basically run by a network in where the Houthi administration call them the supervisors network. I usually compare them as no difference than a cartel, because if you look into them closely, those supervisors literally have turfs, and each supervisor are given a certain turf in which they are required to mainly work as hard as possible to generate income. So means that they do a regular taxation on local businesses and normal people. They run an active recruitment campaign, and this recruitment campaign includes the employees, the public sector, schools, universities, everything they can to keep the flow of recruits into the movement. And the other and third thing, which is the indoctrination campaign. The Houthis feel the need that they have to keep educating the public. But when you look into this, what they call the education, the camps, the summer courses that they do, it's more of an indoctrination about the Houthi ideology. What do they believe in? How do they view the world? And how to view the world, it's simply, if you read the writings of Hussein al-Houthi, which is the founder of the movement, it's based on two main ideas. The first idea is that in order for the Muslim world to be glorious again, it needs to give allegiance to the descendants of Prophet Muhammad, in which Hussein al-Houthi and his family believe to have given this special role to lead the Yemeni people and be like their salvation. And the second pillar, which is how do they view the international world, which is basically the Muslim world has been suffering an occupation by mainly Israel and an imperialist United States. And therefore, anyone who's trying to fight what they refer to as an imperialist United States need to be working with them within the movement that actually started by the birth of Khomeini in Iran. And that's where the merge, the Houthis came as a merge between those two ideologies. The Iranian revolution as an inspiration to Islamist movements in the Muslim world, plus this local angle to it, which is what the Houthis have been trying to do inside Yemen. My actually first interaction with the Houthis was in 2008 during the fourth war, and when I went to Sada in the fourth war, which is up the north of Yemen, I was encountered by children, literally children running checkpoints. And at the time, our main concern is that these are children who have been raised in unfortunate circumstances, but mainly once an opportunity does present itself in front of them, once they're giving inclusion into the political process, things will change. Unfortunately, this was exactly the opposite of what happened. When the Houthis were given the opportunity to join the other Yemenis into shaping and forming their future in what we called the national dialogue and be part of the coming constitution, they actually started an active military campaign until they took control over the capital. Now, while they're doing that, as the situation today, there are two sides of the Houthis. The Houthis that do talk to politicians and attend meetings with the UN envoy, and the active decision makers within the movement. And the active decision makers within the movement are people who actually believe in keeping this fight and struggle going on. What I would like to show you is in my hometown in Hajjah. I went there in 2013 during a fighting that occurred between the local tribes and the Houthis, and we were trying to convince the Houthis just to go out of the village and remove the landmines that they have placed. The Houthis use the tactic of spreading fear and terror amongst the local communities, so no one in the future could dare even to oppose them. So if I would ask the IT to show a very quick clip of what happened in one of the villages in my hometown in Hajjah, North Yemen. Now, believe it or not, this was actually filmed by the Houthis themselves. And I can show you hundreds of clips of them blowing up. But in this specific incident, the Houthis went into this house. This is a tribal sheikh, very well respected in the area. They executed him with his family. They blew up his house and they published the video for the public to see. If that's not the definition of terrorism, I'm not sure what is the definition of terrorism. Now, again, when the bombing of the Aden airport happened on the 30th of December, a civilian airport was bombed, and they knew very well that the media will be filming this. This was specifically exactly like how Al-Qaeda views and enjoys spreading their propaganda. It is through fear and intimidation of the public. I don't need to go even further. Just if anyone is interested, just go into their own TV channel, Al Masira, and they do have it's online. You can see it on the internet, and just have 2-hour or 3-hour view of what Al Masira is showing. And can you tell me any difference than what is Al Masira showing is any way different than what Al Qaeda are doing in their publication? Is there anything of the rhetoric of what they're showing, of what they're explaining, of the incitement of violence and sectarian ideology that they're trying to pass? Imagine how the Yemeni people are living on a day-to-day basis, fearing from this movement. And I would like to
there are just we're a bit over the time. Can you just be quick?
I'll wrap up with one comment from. I have a friend who works in a very big humanitarian organization. I won't say the organization or the name for his own safety, but this is what he said, and I quote. He said, "I have been trying to work through a program of distributing cash for work in our programs in Sana'a. The Houthis have prevented me repeatedly from doing so. Eventually, they came into my office and they threatened that they were going to detain and forcefully disappear me with my colleagues if I don't stop my programs, because as they said, that the distribution of my program of cash in exchange for work is removing the recruits from the battlefronts, because people will start working. We said we don't not need people. People need to go to the battlefront. We need to raise a generation of people, of soldiers, and literally he word they use jihadis, mujahideen. And he said, of course, I had no other option but to shut down the program and work with the demands of this Houthi supervisor. And again, I can mention hundreds and hundreds of examples of how they have been diverting aid, stopping the delivery of humanitarian workers. And I think nothing needs to say more than the words of the WFP themselves on how they explained how much their work has been affected by what the Houthis are doing in northern Yemen. Thank you very much, and thanks, Honor, for being very generous with me with the time.
Thank you, Vera. Now I leave the floor to General Votel. So what do you think?
Thank you, Honor. And let me just again tell everybody I'm very, very glad to be with you today. Honored to speak on this forum. So I wrote an article back in December, and the title of my article here was that political support, not terrorist designation, is key to moving forward in Yemen. And I wrote this because I was aware that this was being considered by our government as a potential policy decision here. Like Bara and others, I think have acknowledged, I think it's important up front here to acknowledge the timing and the political atmosphere in my country right now. This is an important policy decision, and I am compelled to say that this is a decision being taken by an administration that will not have to deal with the effects of their decision right here. So I think it's important for everybody to recognize that. In my article, I think I try to highlight the horrendous situation on the ground. I think everybody is certainly aware of that. The millions and millions of people, to include many, many children, who are impacted on a day-to-day basis and require persistent humanitarian aid to get through their lives. I acknowledge the absolute horribleness of the Houthis. As we've already heard here, the group is intransigent, is contributing to the strife on the ground here, and through their own leadership, particularly as a so-called government in place here, they have not made the situation better, but worse for all of the people. Foreign terrorist organization designation, in my view, will impact the population more than it will impact the Houthi movement. And my key points to that are that it will disrupt the delivery of humanitarian aid that is so vital for the people. It will slow and stop the work of international agencies and other businesses that are trying to contribute to this effort and support the people as a political solution is pursued. And then third, it will slow and complicate an already complicated political process. So I don't know that it particularly helps. In the final analysis, from my perspective, this will require a political process to resolve. It will be very difficult. There's no doubt about it. It has been difficult. It will take a lot of time, but that is just the way this is going to have to be resolved. I would just share for the audience just a few comments on foreign terrorist organization designation. This is a tool that is used by the U.S. government in pursuit of some of our policy objectives. We have a history of doing this. It's been in place for a long period of time. We've designated in dozens and dozens of groups as foreign terrorist organizations, going back to Abu Sayyaf group in the Philippines, and most recently, as many of you have seen over the last few years, the multiple branches of ISIL and ISIS that have perpetrated across the globe. It is designed to principally support our policy objectives. It is, in my view, not necessarily designed to punish people, but it is designed as a tool for us to use for our policy objectives. The designation is made by the Secretary of State. That is within his authority, and he has a responsibility to inform the Congress of those decisions. There is a legal criteria that goes with this. It must be a foreign organization, must have engaged in terrorist activity, and must threaten the security of U.S. national or national security of the United States. So that last one, I think, is an important one to highlight, is that these organizations must pose a threat to U.S. security in particular. Terrorist activities, as we've talked about, can be a variety of things. They should be premeditated, politically motivated violence, and perpetrated against non-combatants, as you look at some of our laws and regulations that guide that. And they normally take the form of hijacking, seizing individuals, kidnappings, if you will, violent attacks on protected persons, assassinations, things like that. The idea behind foreign terrorist organization designation is to prevent material support or resources from getting to these organizations. And this material support runs the gambit from arms to advice, frankly, and a lot of stuff in between. So it can affect a lot. It can affect the travel of members of this particular organization, isolating them, preventing them from moving around. And it gives authorities to retain possession over funds and other resources that belong to this organization that may be an overseas location. It also has some other effects. It supports our efforts to stop terrorist financing and encourage others to take action on this. It stigmatizes and isolates these designated terrorist organizations internationally, and it deters donations and contributions and economic transactions. It heightens public awareness and knowledge of terror organizations, and it signals our concern to other governments about this. So with all of that said, that's what foreign terrorist organization designation does. In my view, I'm not yet convinced that that this decision, this policy decision we have made is in the best interests of our strategy, or in the best interest certainly of the people of Yemen. That's my position. Someone who has worked in Yemen, mostly in the counterterrorism area, but certainly has seen these tools be applied. So, Owner, I'll stop there and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, sir, for your insightful comments. And now I leave the floor to Dave. Yes, Dave, what do you think?
Thank you, Owner. Thank you. And thank you, everybody. And also thanks for hosting this. It couldn't be more timely. I want to just walk through some of the mechanics of this a little bit more. So this designation will come into effect on January 19th. And as General Votel pointed out, the Trump administration is doing this in its very last days, leaving all the policy implications for the Biden administration. This designation can be amended, modified, canceled upon the signature of the incoming Secretary of State as well. There are some other elements of this that are important. In the briefing to Capitol Hill yesterday, the Pompeo State Department did not provide the language for the OFAC licensing, the exemptions, or the waivers that would relate to humanitarian assistance or private sector trade in basic commodities. So this is very important because the material support element of this means, as General Votel said, no support really, except for the most de minimis, can flow into any Houthi-controlled territories. Now, let me just reiterate what everybody else has said. The Houthis are a horrific organization that are primarily responsible for the suffering, in my view, primarily responsible for the suffering of the Yemeni people. They could change the humanitarian equation tomorrow. So they are extremely bad actors, and they've also, they're not only bad inside Yemen, but they're also bad in the region and kind of externally. But the problem with this designation is that any transaction that touches the international financial institutions will be problematic for any institution. And so it will immediately, given the ambiguity of the exceptions and the waivers and the OFAC licenses, it will immediately cause all entities that engage or touch in any way the international banking system to cease operations. So that's any traders that import food or other basic commodities who use letters of credit or dollars or foreign currencies, or any banks that touch or go through the New York Reserve. All of that will have to cease because that will give criminal and civil liability risk to any entities that are engaged in these transactions. The same is also true for the NGOs. And given the ambiguity right now on the language and the uncertainty of its rollout, the prudent thing for any corporate entity, including the nonprofits, to do is just to cease operations, because they can't simply take that risk. And so that will cause immense suffering to the people of Yemen. It could literally seize the entire trading system, the entire humanitarian system, and any hopes of deconflicting this war, right? So the private sector will be out. The humanitarian organizations will be out until and if there's ever clarity on what this designation will mean. The other thing that worries me is that we're not new at this, right? We've done this before. And so the economic theory behind this Pompeo designation is that economic pressure on the Houthis will yield political change, right? The presumption is if we put sanctions, if we put pressure on the Houthis, they will be more likely to come to the bargaining table. And I don't think that there's any evidence of that. I mean, there's already sanctions on Houthi leadership and designations on Houthi leadership, and it hasn't changed the nature of the conflict. If anything, the Houthis are actually stronger today than they were 5 years ago. And so this designation will almost certainly move any of the Houthi leadership and transactions further underground, probably tightening the nexus with Iran and probably elevating the risk of further and deeper conflict because there's no exit ramp. How do I know this? Most of my experience actually has not been in Yemen. Most of my experience has been in the Levant. And if you look at both Hamas and Hezbollah, very bad actors, terrorist organizations that have, from a US perspective, have killed Americans, right? They had the Foreign Terrorist Organization designation in 1997. Nothing in this designation has inhibited their ability to continue their terror activities and to launch wars against our allies and civilians. And my overriding sense is that this blunt tool will backfire. And those that are pushing it, whether it's the Saudis or the UAE or the Pompeo State Department, better be damn sure that the consequences of a vast humanitarian collapse, that risk is greater than what the outcome is. And I just don't think that there's any analysis out there that suggests that this will be kind of a defining moment for the Houthis that will weaken their capabilities and lead to a more peaceful outcome. And with that, I'll stop and happy to enter into the discussion and questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I'm getting back to you, Bara. So there's across the board, there's an agreement that Houthis do not deserve our sympathy, as General Votel puts it in his article. Everybody's in agreement with what you said before about the techniques that they use to threaten the Yemeni society and the people under their rule and how they operate. But the issue is, the point that has been raised so often is that whether we designate them as a foreign terrorist organization or not, they're going to be always well off, because the structure that you described before is already works. And by this, they're going to be still good after this designation, but it's going to be the Yemenis who are going to suffer and take the bad parts of this designation.
Sure.
What would you say to this question?
Sure. The point is, if we start looking into just simply as and I agree. So let's by the end of I would like to pass a question for both. So what you're saying is basically, if we can avert the consequences, the humanitarian consequences and the risks to the trade, would the Houthis deserve to be designated as a terrorist organization? And I would like to hear the answers, of course, from both of the both distinguished guests. But let me respond quickly to what they've raised. One is the humanitarian catastrophe. The humanitarian catastrophe, if we continue in this course, tomorrow the Houthis will control the entire humanitarian programs in most parts of Yemen, because simply there is no challenge from the international community from what they are already doing, from how much you have literally Houthis diverting aid towards their fighters, and they're not being challenged, or no question has been asked what is really happening. Now, second to saying that they have become stronger, the main reason is because every time when there is a serious effort, the Houthis literally are holding a civilians hostage. And what the message we're saying is, simply because they're holding the humanitarian programs hostage and the civilians hostage, that we need to keep things as they are. We shouldn't designate them. We shouldn't challenge them. We should just keep it the way it is. And I think this sends the wrong signal. This means that the Houthis need to keep on going what they're doing, because as long as they don't touch Americans, as long as they don't act, I mean, they have killed Americans, and I think both of you know that they have tortured and kidnapped Americans inside Yemen. But as long as they don't keep on pursuing this as an active policy, they're safe. They're safe to hold the humanitarian, the civilians and the humanitarian programs hostage. The third, and most importantly, the efforts, every time there is an effort to hinder the Houthis' capability, this is the card that is being raised. So when the operation, when there was a serious operation to take the main port out of the Houthis' hands, what was used is actually, this is going to cause a humanitarian. So what we need to be working really is, how can we change the course of how can we, have an active policy of making sure that the humanitarian relief and programs keep on flowing into the country? How can we minimize the damage as much as possible, but without really rewarding the Houthis of what they're doing? I think this should be the policy, because if everything is, we're going to stop it because it goes underground, then when there is a war on drugs, for example, they go underground. But that doesn't mean you stop criminalizing drugs because it's just going to go underground. No, actually, you try to work other ways, and you try to advert how can we avoid the effect on the local population and the civilians. So I think what we should be working on is, how can we make sure that this designation, how we can get enough waivers, and how can we ensure the flow of humanitarian programs keep on going to the north of Yemen, and try to, as much as possible, limit the benefits of the Houthis. And the Houthis are benefiting. One of the main oil importers to the country now is run by an organization run by Mohammed Abdul Salam, the Houthi spokesperson. He's benefiting from this, loose definition of what we consider is the Houthi terrorism actions.
Thank you. Thank you, Bara. I'm getting back to General Votel. So I have just two questions based on the things that you raised before. The first one is that there was discussion yesterday saying that there is already a US sanctions program against the actors in Yemen. And the names that were cited yesterday on the 10th of December by the Secretary of State were already there. So what are more kind of specific reasons for this declaration, this designation as foreign terrorist organization? Do you think it's going to change anything on the ground in terms of repressive kind of measures? And yes, please, sir.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I don't know. It's not evident to me that it is going to change things on the ground in a way that is going to move us forward towards some specific objective. It's just not clear to me. I actually think Dave stated it the very best here, is that the benefit of designation does not outweigh the risk of worsening the humanitarian situation right now. We have not made the case for that in my view, and as a result, I just think that the designation right now, without any work to put processes, put provisions in place to ensure that some amount of humanitarian aid can get to the people. I mean, none of that is addressed, as I understand right now, in this current provision. This is potentially going to do more harm than it will good with this. So it's just very unclear to me that the designation is going to help us move towards political progress, that it's not going to, it's unclear to me whether it's certainly not going to make the situation better in the near term. And it doesn't appear that the work has been done to address some of the provisions that will need to be in place to work through this.
Okay, thank you, sir. Now I'm getting back to Dave. Based on what you said before and based on your experience in the field, I have a small question. So in the statement, it says, the US Department of the Treasury will be prepared to provide licenses pursuant to its authorities operating in Yemen and to those of international organizations such as UN and non-governmental organizations. How realistic is it is it going to be possible really to coordinate so many kind of licenses, and is it going to be basically realistic?
Yeah, you raise a really valid question. So my understanding, and again, I'm not in government, right? But my understanding is right now, the Treasury has not drafted and circulated and provided that language to the NGO and business, to the NGO community and the business world. And there's no time frame as to when that will be set out. And additionally, once you're outside of these exemptions, the Department of Justice has not taken off the table its ability to prosecute on a criminal or civil basis any entity that provides material support. And so again, it's very important to understand that if any activity touches the international financial banking system, it will cease when this comes out, absent a license or a clearly written exemption, which hasn't been done. So food imports, medical imports, forget the NGOs for a second, because most of the basic commodities, probably 95% of the basic commodities for Yemen are brought in by private sector traders. They will not be able to do this given the FTO designation and the lack of clarity on the exemptions. And it's extremely unlikely that these things are going to be kind of unwound or written out, certainly in the time between now and the 19th, in the very, very last days of the Trump administration. So yeah, this is going to be a very big problem.
So, Honor, can I ask a question here quickly?
Yeah, sure.
So Dave, what you're saying is, can I ask the question again? If there was a way to avoid what you mentioned is the risk to the trade and the humanitarian relief programs, would you be, supporting the designation of the Houthis as a terrorist organization?
So, look, again, I think that the Houthis are very bad actors, and they are primarily responsible for the suffering of the Yemeni people. I don't think that these blunt tools achieve the policy goals of deconflicting Yemen, no matter what. And so, in a sense, I don't really care one way or the other, but let me be clear. The theory is economic pressure on the Houthis will yield political change. And in my experience working with Hamas and Hezbollah, that has never been the case, right? That economic pressure yielded the political change. It's not an unreasonable theory. It just hasn't been brought out in practice. So let me ask you, wait. Let me ask you something, Bara. You're from northern Yemen, okay?
Yeah.
If instead of trying to drive down the economy of northern Yemen to the Stone Age, if the Saudis and the Saudi-led coalition and others simply changed the equation and opened up the economics where all ports, all avenues, all channels were able to flood in with basic commodities, and where young men in northern Yemen were able to sell high-priced pomegranate juice to Jeddah markets, maybe they wouldn't be so interested in being Houthi fighters. Just as your friend in the UN agencies or in the World Food Program said, he needs a job and the Houthis don't want people to have jobs. Well, if you change the economic equation where economics supported peace or supported deconfliction as opposed to tried to yield political change, maybe better economics would be more likely to yield political outcomes that we want.
Well, actually, I agree. And I think let me say this very clearly. I think the Gulf countries in general have made a mistake by leaving the economy of Yemen in its current shape for quite so long, that in 2014 made the ground very fertile for the Houthis to exploit and use it to backfire on Saudi Arabia and the neighbors. But unfortunately, we're not dealing with what could have been done back then or before 2014. The situation is how is it today? My fear is the Houthis will drive the economy down to the ground and will be exploiting all of the humanitarian programs. Now, if the humanitarian programs now today are complaining, now just imagine, I can only imagine what would happen in 1 year if they continue operating under the Houthis the way they are carrying their operations in North Yemen. They are literally confiscating private businesses. They started this year, in the last 6 months, confiscating big businesses in the north of Yemen. Very, very soon, all of the businesses will be controlled by the Houthis, will be owned and controlled by the Houthis. Very soon, all of the humanitarian programs will be controlled by the Houthis. Now, whatever humanitarian relief programs will be sent to the north of Yemen will actually have the opposite effect, because literally the only beneficiaries of that program will be Houthi fighters. This is the biggest fear. And I'm not saying that just this because it happened that, I've seen what the Houthis are doing. I know anyone who until today tried to even oppose or even suggest any altercations to the Houthi leadership is expelled. Until today, until last week, senior tribal leaders forced out of their homes in northern Yemen. Is that what we need? Like, do we need to keep on watching the situation unfolds without serious actions? Now, what this designation will mean is that the local alliances that the Houthis have been building will start to reconsider, to actually say, actually, the Houthis do not have a political future. We need to reconsider. Maybe we need to push them towards agreeing or being more inclusive with the rest of the Yemenis, in order for all of us to have a future together. This is what we're trying to achieve. We're working in an undesirable, very unfortunate circumstances. I wish we could have gone back to before 2014 and tell the Houthis, to tell the Saudis, sorry, you need to work on, financing the economy, inject more cash into the financial system in Yemen. But this is the situation as we stand today.
Thank you, Barat. Thank you for these insightful comments. Now I will get back to, we are in the last 10 minutes of the event, and I will go back to questions. We have around 15 questions coming from our viewers. And also we have like one comment, and Harry Thompson says, the issue of aid is important, but this year total aid comes to $3.18 billion. Remittances, person-to-person transfers run at over $5 billion a year. These small bank transfers eclipse done rate. If these are made illegal by FTO designation, the bulk flow of remittances from Yemenis in Saudi to their families in Yemen will move via the Hawala networks, thus increasing transaction costs to the poor. If the exemptions and caveats around designation are drawn broadly enough, the designation itself becomes meaningless. So he points to a good point here. Also, I have one question here, and I think it comes today. Francesco Terugi says, I was wondering if this designation can definitely push the Houthis to disengage from talks about the Safar oil tanker.
Yeah, I mean, that's an excellent point. First of all, on the remittances, it's absolutely true, right? I mean, the remittances aren't going to be able to go forward. And again, it's the private sector economy, including the remittances, that are going to be the big consideration here, as opposed to aid, which is it's a small fraction of the total amount of the economy. And the FSO SAFR is a really underreported risk, and it's something that I've actually written about a lot. And if the FSO SAFR, the oil tanker off the Red Sea coast, breaks, it'll be 4 times the Exxon Valdez in terms of the oil spill, and it'll be a horrific environmental and economic catastrophe. Again, the Houthis are bad actors, right? They could solve this problem in a heartbeat. They feel like that there's $60 million worth of oil that is sitting in that tanker that they can use. And so instead they're keeping the entire world hostage by not allowing that tanker to be decommissioned and pulled out, and the oil pulled out, even though they entered into an agreement with the UN, not too long ago. But I mean, I think that that's an immense risk. The FSO SAFR is an immense risk, and this complicates it even further because nobody can deal with the Houthis, right? As Joe Votel mentioned, you can't even speak to them or give them advice, or have send them to Oman to have negotiations about this, or bring in or pay visas to bring in the engineers to begin to decommission this. So yeah, we're at a really big risk, and the FSO SAFR is another fundamental challenge.
So General Votel, I have two questions to you. The first one comes from Steve Osborne from Department of War Studies in King's College London. He asks, UN sanctions remain in place on Yemen. UN sanctions on Yemen have led to numerous weapon seizures. Are the US designations a sign that the UN sanctions are failing to achieve their aims? If not, why diverge from the multilateral approach? This is the first one. Just I have another one which is quite close to this, and that's why I want to combine these two. After the terrorist designation of Houthis in Yemen in the region, how will this decision affect Iran?
Thank you. Well, Stephen, I think I'm asking the same questions that that you are here. I don't know that this is a acknowledgement that that the UN sanctions have failed on this. I think perhaps this is more about trying to create broader pressure on Iran, frankly, and be seen as taking a step against the Houthis, and I don't think we should dismiss the fact that some of this may be related to some of the other arrangements that have been made in the region under the Abraham Accords. That there may be some linkage between this designation and certain promises that might have been made. I don't know that. I'm not involved in that. I've just done my own reading on that, and I think there at least have suggested perhaps a connection between that. So I don't know that it is. I don't know what the good reason is to diverge from the multilateral approach. My experience while I was in uniform and in this position was maximum support to the UN special envoy in the things that he was doing. So I think that's the kind of the piece. I think the impact on Iran is probably going to be minimal here. They already seem to have ways of getting materials and other things into this area to support things. So I don't know that this is going to have an impact. I think ideally it's designed to isolate them more, draw more attention to some of their other nefarious activities, but I don't know that it is going to make things demonstrably worse for Iran or cause them to have a change in behavior.
So there's another question to you from Murat Çalışkan, and also I'm really sorry for the previous question to respect the name of the person who posed the question. It was Serdar Gül. And this is from Murat Çalışkan. As General stated, US have recently designated many groups as foreign terrorist organizations. Although it's an effective tool, apparently it does not prevent similar groups from emerging. As many analysts claim, the root causes should be removed to fight against radical groups. What should the US and its allies do to remove the root causes? Current efforts in this sense are enough?
Well, I think it's safe to say that the current efforts are not enough, and I mean, this I think is a fairly significant debate within U.S. policy circles here in terms of what is our responsibility, what is our role in this. Certainly in many of these locations, excuse me, to include Yemen, these problems are being caused by deep underlying tensions that have coursed through the area for long periods of time before this designation that has taken place. So fundamentally, there are issues that have to be addressed. The international community, certainly the local leadership and authorities need to play a role in addressing those types of things. And I think that is that is very, very important. This does not get after. Designation, again, is a good tool when in certain situations here, but it does not get after the underlying issues either. I don't disagree with the question being asked here. I think it's an excellent one, but it's going to take more than one country. It's going to take a multilateral approach. It's going to take a lot of time to address that.
Okay. There's one question to Bara from Emre Bilgin. Do you think that this designation could play a role for independence of South Yemen? Could this designation and its effects in that arena accelerate the secessionist policy of Southern Transitional Council?
I think we need to have unfortunately, I won't be able to just answer a very quick question on the secession, because the secession of Yemen and the secessionists issue and the Southern issue needs a much broader, discussion. The reality is the actions of the Houthis, specifically in 2015, did build up. It did result into the feeling of many Southerners that they're being attacked by the Houthis, who are predominantly Northerners. So more likely, I would say, the actions of the Houthis resulted into exacerbating and increasing the demands of the. So it added fuel to the fire. The way how to avoid that is we have more solidarity voices and more unified voice coming from all parts across Yemen, that we need a better future for the whole of the country. I certainly would love to see those children fighting for the Houthis have a better future, go to schools, and have a bright future ahead of them. Unfortunately, this is not the way. As long as the leadership, the Houthi leadership, continues in their course. And what I would like to say finally is simply, I think it's at least a positive indication that neither the general nor Dave, despite all of the warnings, none of them would suggest removing Hamas or Hezbollah from being designated, which means simply is, yes, we do have concerns about many groups, and is this actually the right approach? But you cannot allow bad actors to continue doing whatever they want simply because they can use civilians hostage. I think Yemenis have the prompt of the work is on the Yemenis. I don't think we should be waiting for answers to come from the US or the international communities. We need a more unified voice towards building a civil, democratic Yemen. And then once we have that in place, whether the Southerners want then to have whatever result, this will be, based on the principles of democracy and free will, not by force.
Thank you, Bara. Thank you for the comments. Actually, we are now on time to finish this webinar, but there's a good question in the end to General Votel, if you may. And I really want to hear. It says, from an anonymous attendee, the question says, this isn't the first time dealing with this issue of bad actors diverting aid funds and holding the population hostage. Abu Sayyaf, Philippines, Somalia, 1992, Hamas, Hezbollah, Venezuela, and now the Houthis. What are the lessons learned from these efforts that we can apply here in the case of Houthis? This is the one. And the other one is quite similar to this, says internal conflicts pose certain difficulties with regards to our understanding and designation of terrorism. Any insights going forward are appreciated. So I see these two questions quite similar to themselves, each other. I would appreciate an answer for that.
Thanks. I think they're very, very good questions. I think from my perspective, and I say this as a military officer here, that I think when we step into these situations and we try to take military heavy approaches into things, that it begins to limit our options right from the beginning, and it doesn't necessarily make the situation better to move on. There certainly is a time for military activity, but there also is a time for a little bit of restraint and certainly a focus on the political diplomatic aspects of these problems before we step in and introduce military force. And in a variety of these events and situations that we've been talking about here, I think we really need to think our way through how we're trying to do this. I mean, a lot of this, a lot of this conflict was made worse by the incursion of the Arab coalition into this particular situation as well. I think we should acknowledge that, and that has not gone as it was intended to go. And as we enter into multiple years of this, it's not contributed to making the situation better. So we have to lean heavily on our diplomatic approaches, and then look at our military approaches as the last resort efforts.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you for all our guests to joining this extremely interesting and informative session. And also my special thanks goes to our guests who made this discussion possible today. I'm really grateful that you joined this session. I just want to finalize this session with 2 words. The first one is that Beyond the Horizon is actually preparing weekly analysis of these hotspots. For Afghanistan, Libya, Yemen, Ukraine, Eastern Mediterranean, and Syria, each week we prepare an AI-based kind of analysis that collects and populates news about those regions, and also which provides a kind of assessment. I invite you to visit our webpage also. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot for joining this session, and have a nice afternoon. Have a good day. Bye-bye.